Okay. Welcome everyone to our first virtual Cambridge Health Network. I'm Pam Garside and I co-chair CHM with Penny Dash. I'm completely gutted we're not here together as we normally are, but we must all respond to this new situation. And we have 160 people at least signed up today, which is terrific, for our seminar on restarting your services post-COVID. How can AI solution help and how do you choose the right one? And we have some breaking news from NHSX that you're going to hear in a moment. So we're all starting to think, or have been thinking for several weeks, about the post-COVID world and how we build on this positive momentum towards the adoption of digital solutions. And we're really pleased to have this terrific lineup of speakers. So would you like to introduce yourselves? Indra, you go first.
Thanks, Pam. Hi, everyone. I'm Indra. I'm the Director of AI at NHSX.
Great, thanks. Dom?
Hi, everybody. My name is Dominic Cushnan, and I work alongside Indra as an advisor on AI and digital health.
Great. Andrew?
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Fern. I'm the Accountable Officer for MRAD, a consortium of 5 NHS trusts in the East Midlands, and we run a radiology consortium. I'm also, in my day job, the Director of ICT Services at Nottingham University Hospitals.
Thanks. Peter?
Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Ketchkamedy, CEO and one of the co-founders of Cairo Medical Technologies, who's doing AI in breast cancer screening.
Great, thank you. So in running the seminar, many of you will be familiar with Zoom and how we do this. We're going to use the Q&A function for asking questions. If you want to make a comment, you can use the chat function. If your question is directed at a particular panelist, please do say so. And if you ask as we go along, we'll answer them after the panelists have presented. And we'll try and answer non-answered questions after the seminar, and we are recording this and we'll send it out to you. And we're going to run a quick poll now to see, to get your initial thoughts on AI. So if you could fill that in, we'll immediately, I'm going to try it too. Oh, I can't. So fill that in, and April, our handy support person, will tell us the results. We ready? Now, do you feel AI is a stage where it can be safely deployed? Hooray, 75% yes, that's good. Are you already considering AI for your trust? Yes, no, not applicable. I think that's because we have quite a few people that are not trust. That's, well, at least we have a majority, well, a larger percent yes. Are you confident you could select the right solution? 37%, interesting. Great, thank you. We're going to do a quick poll at the end to see if anything's changed. Great, thank you. So Indra, over to you to kick us off, thanks.
Brilliant, thanks, Pam. Isn't this exciting?
Muted.
I always find these things wonderfully exciting in human life, but let's see if I can transmit some of my natural Joshi energy through a screen, which will be a challenge. So I thought it might be useful just to give not so much of an update of what we're doing, but some of the stuff we're practically doing to try and answer this question of, like, how do you restart your services and how can AI technologies help you? So quite a lot of you may or may not know, but we announced the formation of an AI lab last summer. We've been working really hard with the team. So Dom is on the team as well and been sort of heading up quite a few of our programs to try and get the groundwork in place to enable that. And some of that groundwork is not cool, sexy technology. Some of it is around the regulations and ensuring that some of the standards and the regulations are in place. And I know Imperial published a paper with some of our regulators, MHRA and CQC, last week around helping those medical devices go through during this COVID time. So maybe later we could share out that link with you all to help. And some of the things we've heard about is actually people want to start rolling out some technologies. You know, we don't have time at this point in time with pilots, etc. So throughout the NHS, we're seeing quite a lot of technologies being rolled out. Some of them have got nothing to do with AI. Some of them are things like telemedicine or virtual consults, which we're seeing a lot of. But what we found was actually programs that we'd wanted to really launch, like the AI award program, which some of you may or may not have applied for. We've had to stall slightly during this time. But in the interim, what we've done is we've worked really hard at trying to collate some practical solutions of what will help you to actually implement some of these technologies. So I'm just going to share my screen, and what we've done is we've published something called a buyer's guide for AI. Just 2 seconds whilst this loads up. Can everybody see that? If some panelists could give me a nod that's visualized. Perfect. So what we've got here is that's the link. It is now live, which is great news, and well done to the team for getting this up. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I'm going to say it is here, and I'll hand over to Dom in a minute to talk us through this. But it's ideally a short reference guide to say what are the different things you need to think about, and as typical with all things technical, when you actually want things to scroll, they don't. But here we go. What are the sort of the 10 areas that you should think about when you're actually being offered a solution or you want to implement a solution? And quite a lot of this is built on our previous work with the code of conduct that we published and some of the standards that we mentioned, but also to understand with colleagues in NHSX to say, well, how can we better help you? So that's one of the things that we've done. And I'll hand over, Dom, to you, if that's okay, to maybe talk through this a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome everybody, especially at this time when we are doing quite a lot in the health system. And I think this buyer's guide really is our attempt at kind of making sense of the landscape at the moment when it comes to AI technologies. There's a lot of providers being asked by technology vendors to use their technology at this time of need. And really we want to just remind people that there are a number of principles that you would want to follow anyway, no matter whether it's an AI technology or it's a digital technology. We put this guide together using some of the principles of the code of conduct and helping people understand things like, does your product meet regulatory standards? And if you don't know what that means, then there's some processes that you need to follow through, and other bits around technical capabilities. But specifically, do you as an organization have the clinical buy-in as well for whether you want to use this technology? And happy to share that link in the chat box as well, but that's just gone live today and ready for people to download, and people can ask questions as they go through the document as well. But it really overlays a lot of the existing thinking and makes it all condensed into one area. Now, this is just one part of the journey of how we make sense of this landscape. We as a team will be doing more deep dives technically and regulatory as to how we make this landscape a little bit more clearer for individuals and our colleagues in organizations that want to use this technology appropriately. So please work with us and please connect with us so that we can work with you to make sure we're providing the right information for you that you need to have, especially over not just COVID, but also in the recovery stage as well.
Great. Indra, did you want to flip back to you, say anything else?
Well, I think we can pick up things in the questions, for sure. But yeah, conscious of time. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Andrew, over to you.
So hi. So we've been using AI in a very odd fashion and trying to explore the opportunities for using artificial intelligence around breast screening. So as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm the accountable officer for EMRAD, the East Midlands Radiology Consortium, a group of 7 trusts in the East Midlands, 5 of whom are live and hold all of their data in one place. So we've got about 3 billion images, all in our vendor neutral archive, and we're using that quite extensively to explore the art of the possible. And I find it really exciting, actually, that we can do something really special and really different with the opportunities with AI. We've been working with Chiron for a while to explore whether or not we can use the MIA product from Chiron as a second reader in breast screening. So to replace the second human with a technological solution to enable us to become more efficient, enable us to get processes working in a way that has a massive difference to NHS care delivery. And we've been looking at a number of things that are required. And just to bring us to the point really of today's session, I mean, we believe that choosing the right AI company is around a couple of things really. Firstly, it's about confidence in the data, and does the algorithm that you're using do what it's supposed to do? That's really an important aspect. You've got to do that. The biggest thing is making sure that you're confident the data is delivering. The second bit though is confidence in people, and it's people in lots of different ways. It's the suppliers. Do the people that you're going to work with actually know what they're talking about? Do they know how this fits into the context of delivering a service? It's the technologists. Do the technologists that you're working with understand how this might fit into the operational flow of services in the future? It's about the clinicians who are going to use the AI tools. Is this going to help them? And one of the things that we've learned over the last 2 years working with Chiron, with our clinicians at a local level in the East Midlands, is that there are different levels of understanding. There are elements of fear, there are elements of enthusiasm, there are elements of apathy, and trying to get those in the right place with our clinical colleagues is really important. One of the big areas though that we spent a lot of time on, and this, bear in mind, this is in a breast screening service, we've worked really hard with the users of the service, the members of the public, and their perceptions, their ideas and their concerns about how we might be able to deliver a clinical service using AI in terms of diagnostics, and that actually I might want a human being looking at my image rather than a machine. What are those challenges and how do they fit? So I'm quite happy to take any questions or comments on any of that, but we have to go for it. Just one other point. I've been an IT director in Nottingham University Hospitals for the last 18 years. In the last 8 weeks, I've delivered more change than I probably have in all of the 18 years before that, at pace. The pace at which we're able to do things, the challenges about challenging the norm is really important for us here, and that's why the opportunities around the use of artificial intelligence, for me, is really, really important for us to go forward with.
Thanks, Andrew. Peter, over to you.
Thanks a lot. I would say, I would really start from where Andrew left off, that the last couple of weeks have led to more change and more deployment than, well, possibly ever before. Of course, we have a sad reality of a pandemic crisis that leads to that. But also, I think there's an unrecognized second wave of crisis that comes as how that crisis really impacts healthcare services in terms of backlogs, etc. So I think it's very important, and Chiron takes it seriously, that we have a responsibility of moving at pace to make sure that the right and safe AI and all sorts of digital solutions can be brought in to help the services that might be under a lot of pressure after lockdown eases. In breast specifically, I think this is quite important, where a lot of the services really stopped while there's a lockdown. And of course, what that means is very, very strong pressure on all the women that are on the services that are screening women, but also all sorts of delays leading to detection of the breast cancer not at an ideal time. So I think, again, there's a lot of responsibility from us to trying to do this fast, but I would also say it is still extremely important to do it safely. So it's really, really welcome that there's a lot of interest in trying to make sure that we maximize AI. It just happens to be ready for when we, or just about ready when we're having a pandemic, but how we not rush it and how we do it safely, but how we do it really in a combined kind of trade-off of safe and fast is extremely important. At Chiron, what we did was go for some very early stage trials. We did that back in 2018. This was a retrospective trial that was pretty much one of the biggest in AI at the time. Now this year we're running again the largest trial. There has been quite a bit of work since. And size of a trial, especially retrospective, is extremely important because what we need to make sure when we're thinking about patient safety is that there is no unaccounted systematic performance drop in an AI algorithm. So just want to repeat that, no unaccounted systematic performance drop. That's primarily what we want to look for in terms of safety. And that takes quite a bit of effort in terms of hunting down what are the confounding factors that can lead to systematic performance drop, and really trying to eliminate them or identifying them so that they can brought into and taken into account when something is rolled out. I would be extremely happy to have questions about exactly how we go forward with maximum pace combined with maximum safety. I think there's a lot of talk about retrospective trials, prospective trials, randomized trials. And I think it is very important to make sure that we're all on the same page, understanding what we're testing for. We're actually testing what we need to test, not test for things that we don't need to test for in order to be really optimizing pace and safety in the same time. I think I would possibly stop there.
Okay.
My intro.
Thank you, Peter, and all our panelists. Keep sending your questions in. We've got several coming in. Could I first ask Indra and Dom? I think we always imagine there's super high-tech academic health science centres and super acute trusts would be the first adopters. But does your guide cover both less, say, technically advanced organisations and even community mental health trusts that wouldn't normally think we should do, would be in the first wave? Do you address them in the guide?
So the guide, I can jump in here if that's okay. So the guide itself is agnostic, really. It's more around how do you think through buying a technology. I think at a very surface level, it does go into some standards, but thinking that through, like what you need to do, because there's a lot of technology companies, a lot of people who think they can solve things quite quickly, and they've not necessarily worked in healthcare before. And we just need to make sure that, I think Peter just said it there, it's very clear that this is all about patient safety. So whatever we implement, whatever type of automation or deep learning or machine learning algorithms, that we have patient safety at the center of it. And following those processes helps us identify and weed out some of those that are not quite ready yet.
Okay. Right. We have some questions coming in. There's one here from Hugh Bettersworth from Marada, and his company is using AI technology to automate parts of radiation treatment planning. Can the panel advise on a validation strategy that would help to win clinical acceptance for using AI for such a task? So yeah, it's about contouring treatment targets. So yeah, it would be with radiotherapists. Anybody want to have a go at that?
I mean, if I could jump in here, this is something that we've been thinking a lot about, and it's not just us here in the UK. I think this is something that internationally a lot of people are looking at, and the WHO and ITU have, I mean, it's almost a year old now, created a benchmarking group which will help with some of these questions. One of the ways we're trying to tackle that here is we have, I mean, it's quite difficult to have a look at every single database or every single image, but what we've looked at is primarily around chest x-rays. So we are creating a chest x-ray related with COVID database to say, how can we help validate some of those models, particularly related to chest x-rays. We've got to try and see whether this works first before we roll it out and do every single image. But I think it's a question that we're asking ourselves. We're asking all the right questions, and this is something that we're looking at to help try and solve that moving forwards.
Okay, great, thank you. Next one is Tracy Austin. Hello, Tracy. For NHSX, what's the current appetite of NHS commissioners to commission AI products and services? Does AI feature on the horizons as a solution for resolving their clinical and service pressures? Again, that will be Indra or Dom.
I mean, again, I would say our role in NHSX is very much to supply the guidance and the standards, which is what we're trying to do. We ourselves aren't commissioners at a local or a regional level. And what we want to do is encourage and help people as much as possible. It is up to the regions and the trusts if they want to commission it themselves. That's their decision. Andrew, I don't know if you've got a view from EMRAD.
Yeah, from my point of view, the commissioners commission the delivery of the healthcare service. They're not necessarily going to specify what solution is going to be put into place. However, we've got to make sure that there is confidence in the approach that's been taken. So, for example, if we talk specifically around breast screening, if you're going to move away from double reporting into a human and a machine, the commissioners are going to have confidence that the output, the product, is going to be as good as the human beings in the reporting process. So I think you've got to give confidence to your commissioners in exactly the same way that you've got to give confidence to the clinical staff that you're working with and to the patients as well, because the commissioners are going to be. It's really important for the commissioners that the patients that are on the recipient end of the service have got confidence that they're getting the right solution set. So I think it's not necessarily about, I think the question is quite a wise one actually, because the commissioners need to be aware of the fact that there may be different ways of delivering solutions. One of the things that's absolutely happened though in the last 8 weeks is we've all learned to deliver things in different ways. And perhaps there is a new world out there that doesn't take ages to jump through various hoops, and people are happy to explore different ways of providing solutions that are safer for the people that we serve.
Thank you. Anonymous, this is anonymous, but it's all right. It's not abusive. Thank you for the session. Do you see any unintended consequences of using AI that we should think about? For instance, damaging the self-confidence of the medics or over-reliance on AI? That's a good one. Peter, do you want to start with that?
I'm happy to take that. I think one of the most important design criteria for AI to be having positive impact is to fit into the workflow in a sustainable way. So that means as it fits into the workflow should be as low interacting or as low interfering as possible, as low change as possible. This will immediately have an impact on confidence of utility and confidence of using it, but also extremely important that, for instance, there's no biasing of the radiologist, or no biasing of the clinicians whatsoever, or at least not in a way that would be negatively impacting them either now as they're doing the work or a couple of weeks down the line, and also not impacting them negatively and in terms of what kind of experience they're gaining through their work. Now, this can be done by directly designing the workflow and the input and the AI algorithm to interact in a way that that all of these items are tagged. Or it can be countered if there's some kind of bias, then countering the bias, providing information about lack of certainty of inputs, or also potentially providing training or teaching capabilities for the radiologists or generally the clinicians is one way of doing it. So the good thing is there's a lot of engineering solutions for a lot of human problems here that are possible to be pulled together. But it's important that we don't go in with an engineering solution that doesn't really ultimately have positive impact. But again, there's lots of options for engineering it right.
Anybody else want to jump in on that? Oh. No, okay. From Martin Frost, as for you, Andrew, how does EMRAD come to a conclusion about how to buy, what to pay for in the AI service, and distinguish between a trial versus a delivered commercial service? What does that commercial journey look like?
Wow, that's a really good question and quite complex. I think the simple fact is, so I've been buying IT in the healthcare space for an awful long time. We use a 5-case model for everything that we buy. We've got to generate a return on investment that's at least 20% in year with no negative impact on I&E. they're the sorts of rules that we work in. So we've got to make sure that even this, though this might be creative and innovative, doesn't mean there's a blank checkbook to actually pay for it. Ultimately, as well, one key thing to point out, it's often accountants that make decisions about what we buy, not economists. So what you've got to absolutely be clear on is that this is a comparative affordable solution. Now, again, if we're talking specifically around breast screening and we're double reporting, if you replace one of those reporters with a machine, it means that you're saving the cost of that reporter. You're also potentially, if you have that second reporter, increasing the amount of work that individual can then go away and do in addition. So if you've got a full complement of reporting staff, then basically you can afford to pay up to two whole-time equivalent reporters for your cost of your AI solution. If you can't recruit enough radiologists to do the reporting though, and you're way, way, way behind because you don't have enough human beings to do your reporting, the value that you may add into your AI solution is different. So one of the things that we've been doing and working with our colleagues in Chiron to do through the Innovate UK funding that we got to trial this is to actually build a model that would apply across the UK and potentially further afield to try and make that judgment as to whether or not the AI solution is good value for money. Ultimately, we're a tax-funded healthcare system in the UK. We've got to offer good value for money.
Great, thank you. There's some extremely good questions rolling in, as you would expect from a CHN audience. Okay, Matt Nisbet, are you able to touch on primary care? We all know that over 90% of patient contacts in the NHS happen in primary care, and yet much of the focus so far has been on hospitals. Is there not scope for patient-facing AI, for example, in triaging patients seeking emergency appointments? Does this require a national solution rather than one commissioned piecemeal via CCGs? Indra or Dom, I guess?
I mean, I can give an opinion on this. I'm very conscious that we aren't the primary care team, and there is a specific primary care team, both in NHS England, who may be better placed to answer this question. But I think it's a very valid question. We are seeing a few technologies out there that do look or help at triaging or screening patients. And one of the things we do need to do, I think there is, and I say this probably with two hats on, is we need to be confident that those technologies are risk proof, because if the decision is going directly without intervention from a healthcare professional, then there may be something that we need to think about there. And I think we're trying to look into that space. But what I would say is, for sure, you know, there's lots of solutions out there. We just need to start somewhere. And that's probably where we started with imaging, because the data quality in imaging is there and the data quantity is also there to be able to do more thorough AI solutions. Andrew, I don't know if you'd agree on that.
I absolutely agree. And I think we've been working with our primary care colleagues in the East Midlands around AI for other things. So it's almost what you understand by the term artificial intelligence anyway. And there are lots and lots of pieces of work that you can use AI for your operational planning of services. So they're not making clinical decisions, they're not making diagnoses or anything like that, but they're actually steering the most effective and efficient route through. And I think what we've seen, particularly in the last few weeks and in the run up to COVID-19, a real shift in the approach around technology to route people appropriately through the pathway. So been able to, for example, use the modeling that we can now use if you've got a sufficient data set to make sure that you've got the, sorry, I'm concentrating on breast screening, but make sure you've got the vans parked in the right place, that you've got the mechanisms for primary care teams to be able to point those communities that perhaps traditionally don't go for breast screening. They're the sorts of things that we need to move into, and you can start to look at potentially risk stratification to make sure that your patient, you've got the right patients going in the right place, and that they're getting the services they deliver. AI isn't just about diagnosis, and we always use radiology as an example, but AI can be used for all sorts of things to improve the way in which we're delivering care. And I think that's one of the big challenges. It doesn't need to be medical. It's exciting and it's new if it's a diagnostic tool. But there are other ways in which we can explore AI in the delivery of care across all sectors of health and social care.
Thank you. There's a question here about guidelines. It's quite long. I'll try and quickly. This is from Franz de Beers, who's a business development manager speaking to many trusts around the country. One of the questions is always asked, we would really like to start using the new technologies, but even if trials show good, excellent results, it seems it doesn't accelerate the change in the guidelines, and it stops trusts from starting enrolling in new technologies. What are ways to increase the acceptance into guidelines? Anyone? Dom?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I've understood the question appropriately, but what I would say is that, you know, from the lab's perspective, and I think we've touched on this specifically on the imaging piece, like how do we create the standards so that we know what good looks like for potential deployment, safe deployment at scale, rather than ad hoc trials on a regular basis. I think we want to get this into real deployment and to create some standards around that, if I understood the question correctly.
Is that there's evidence there, but it hasn't made its way into guidelines. I think that's what it is. No, Indra. Sorry, Andrew. Sorry.
Yes, I think, Pam, the NHS is rubbish at making decisions about getting things delivered. We always take ages and ages and ages, and we want proof and evidence that it's worked here, there, and everywhere before we'll go anywhere near it. And I do understand that reticence. I come back to the boxes, the hoops that we have to jump through before we can go forward. And so I think there is a difference almost. So, however, once we've made the decision, then we want it in, and we want it in and working very, very quickly. So I think there's a difference almost from perspective, from those delivering solutions to those actually trying to receive it. And I think that's a challenge that we've had outside of AI as well. But it is something that working closely with and getting companies to work closely with people in the NHS is really helpful, because if they understand the mechanisms and processes that we have to go through for approval, there starts to be an awareness of that. But it's a big challenge. We're very awkward customers at times.
Yeah, but I would totally mirror what you're saying there, Andrew. And also there is an element of understanding what is the problem that your product is trying to solve. Like, it's not just about the guidelines, and it's not just about implementing that product, but quite often it's about understanding the host environment and understanding what is the problem that particular area, region, trust, whatever it might be, is trying to solve. And I think there are an abundance of technologies out there, and some of them are amazing, and some of them really do solve problems, but it's really understanding the solution and the problem, and then the change management around that. And I think sometimes that journey is something that it takes time, and you need to work through that with people.
Yeah, just to push the buyer's guide, I think that's made quite clear in there. I think, you know, it's not just about the technology solution, but is your host organization also ready? Are the clinicians that are going to work with your technology, do they want to use it? You know, this is it's change in any organizations. It can be it's human to human rather than human to machine.
Thank you. There are 3 questions about patients and the public. Rob Can, who says thank you to the presenters. Not only do commissioners and clinicians need to be confident in AI tools, but so do patients. What do you think is the best approach to educate the public on what is and is not capable? And then I've got some Subashini who's saying, how are you tracking population sentiment to an AI-enabled healthcare? How can we mitigate the risk of some citizens and communities distrusting AI when trust is key to engagement? And the final one, which is all in this group, is there a consideration for surveys with patients' clients to know their view concerns on use of AI? Good questions. Who wants to kick off with the patient view?
I mean, we quite often get asked this question about AI and patients. And what I would say is it's not necessarily about AI, it's more about data. and what are patients' views on uses of data. And it's not just patients, it's the public, the general public, carers, patients, and us, the healthcare professionals working within it. And there is a lot of work, and we work with a lot of partners, like, for example, understanding patient data. There is a new initiative that's coming out of the NDG's office around public perceptions of data. And so I would say this is a much wider conversation, and AI is just one type of technology that uses data, but actually there's lots of different types of technology out there that use data, and we have to have that open conversation. And we do have a regular discussion through, I need to get the word right now, I think it's called the Data Collective group that our teams have set up. So I would say those conversations are happening, but it's an ongoing dialogue. It's not a kind of a one-off, we've done it, tick the box. This is an ongoing dialogue as technology evolves.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, Andrew.
I do think that the confidence thing is important. We've got, as I mentioned in EMRAD, we've got a huge amount of data, and we chose very carefully to step into breast screening first for the application around AI, mainly because it's double reported. So one of the things that we can do to give confidence to the public and to the patients using the service is, yes, we're going to use an algorithm to help with the diagnosis, but it's also going to have that human being, that doctor is still going to be in that mechanism too. And so as we can then use that as a demonstrator, we can then move on to other areas of AI to build confidence, and we can use that to then say, look, these are the levels of success that we're having. I mean, looking at the results that we're getting from working with Chiron, the algorithm is working as well, if not better than some of the human beings. But that's not the point. The point is that the public need human reaction for healthcare delivery, and it's how can you build that into the workflow in a healthcare environment to allow the AI to supplement that medical input rather than remove it altogether. And I think that's also important when winning over some of our clinical colleagues who have anxieties about the step into AI. There's lots of presumptions that we won't need radiologists in the future. That's tosh, frankly. Of course we will. We'll always need the human element to deliver care, but the AI can supplement that and plug those areas and speed up the process to make that result quicker and better for the patient. That's the other area that we've been concentrating on. How can we get the time from the acquisition of the image to the result as small as possible for those people who've come and stepped into that environment where they've had a mammography and they've actually now gone away thinking, I'm really anxious about what the result is. Reducing that amount of time, that's critical. Doing that and demonstrating to the public that using the technology allows us to improve that is something that will help win over the population. But this is a long task for us to do, not something we can do quickly or presume because one or two technically able people believe the story. We're missing out on everyone else. There are populations in the UK at the moment who don't come for screening for various different reasons. We don't want to add another one to that reason for not turning up.
I would say also from our side, this is one of the areas that we took very seriously. So we worked with a patient advisor who is also a breast cancer surgeon, so could really help us understand multiple angles of the whole patient journey, as well as from basically two sides, from the care side as well as from the patient side. But also we reached to over 400 patients to try to get their feedback of, okay, what do we need to take care of? What is the what are their feelings? How do we really want to build a service so that they feel comfortable that they're still being taken care of? It's some kind of change going on in the background. I think that's quite important. I think there's quite a bit of ongoing work going with this, and I think especially not just smaller scale but larger scale. But I advise everyone to seek that kind of advice.
Okay, thank you. The next one's a comment rather than a question from Vaughan Lewis. I disagree that commissioners are only interested in commissioning activity and that it is at the discretion of providers to determine how this activity is delivered. We need to think beyond the traditional purchaser-provider model and work collaboratively to address safety, quality, and productivity. Yeah, hooray to that. I think most people would agree with that. Thank you. Dermot O'Riordan, hi Dermot, asks, who is liable if a combination of AI and a human read a mammogram if a mistake is made? Who's liable if an AI and human read it together, read the same one and a mistake is made? Peter, do you want to do that?
Absolutely. Again, I think this comes down to the solution and the workflow. What we wanted to make sure from our side is that in any possible information flow workflow, the patient is always checked by at least one human. Or if there is a disagreement between human reader and AI, then there's another second human who makes the determination. So we're not trying to move away from Verdi where the reliability is, because I believe that would be a bit too hard and would take a very, very long time. What we're trying to do is give as much information for those doing the work to make sure that they can do as well as they can. And so short, there's no real change in the interest of moving fast. We're not trying to remove the authority of those experts doing the work. And I think that's where the critical element lies to get going. And so that's where we focus so far.
Anyone else? Andrew, do you have a? No?
It's a tricky one, really. Nothing particularly to add, I don't think, that I haven't already said.
Okay. Mark Lomax, hi Mark. What reflections do the panel have about how the laboratory, should maybe operate differently, having learnt from the dramatic change that has happened in the last 8 weeks? Any comments on that? Dom, you're nodding. That means you answer it.
Indra's the boss. Go on, Indra, you go first, and then I'll agree with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that they meant the AI lab versus like a microbiology lab.
Sure.
I mean, if we're talking about the AI lab,
I tell you what, let's ask Mark to type in the chat or Q&A whether he means the AI lab or laboratory. Okay, while we're doing that, there's a question about the private sector. Anonymous, how does AI feature in non-tax funded healthcare in the UK? Is progress faster in that sector than you might expect? So private sector versus public, any views? Peter, do you know? No views on that. Andrew, sorry, go Indra, yeah.
I mean, I would say one of the things we have to look here is the sort of the compensation model and the way we pay. And I know previously we were looking at how one of the areas during the AI award, what we wanted to look at was how do we fund AI technologies versus the traditional model of funding that we currently have. And that was one of the things we were going to look at. So it's not really an answer to the question, like how we're going to do it. I guess the answer is we want to look at how we do it, but we've got to start implementing some and evaluating those as we move forward.
I say the volume of data generally in the NHS dwarfs the private sector, but I don't know whether that's much of an answer, but the data is just such at a different scale. Mark's got back, he means the AI lab.
Great. There's been a lot of chat about labs at the moment, which aren't the AI lab. I mean, thanks, Mark. This is a great question. We've really had to rethink how we are looking at our strategy moving forward in this time. And as I mentioned before, we've had to pause certain programs and certain programs haven't moved as fast as we would have liked them to do. I guess the simplest answer is we're going to have to operate differently, but I don't think it's just the AI lab. I think, and Andrew and others, I mean, it's really difficult here because I can't see an audience to nod with me, but I think the NHS is going to have to think differently about how it approaches technology in general, moving out of COVID, is the honest answer.
Yeah, and I think just echoing Andrew's statement earlier as well about what he's seen over a number of years, and people's appetite for using technology. I think this is a time where people are starting to ask serious questions about. I think AI as a whole umbrella has a number of connotations to it, but how do we use data to enable a more robust conversation about how we deliver services is going to be the live question. How do we operate today to make decisions on a regular basis using that going forward? And where the lab will come into that, as Indra said, we're trying to look at how do we respond to these needs quite quickly.
Okay, thank you. On the private sector topic, Ali Hassan has just got back. Thanks, Ali. Hi, Pam. We haven't seen a huge amount of utilization of AI in the private sector, except where we've partnered with companies specifically using AI, such as Skin Analytics. As the non-tax funded model is on a direct fee-for-service basis, the barriers to utilization differ from those in the NHS. Okay, thanks. Back to Anonymous, could you describe an exemplar of AI adoption in the current NHS system? What went well, what not? What's the recommendation learnings from that? That's quite a big question. Good one. Does anybody want to have a go at that? Indra?
I mean, I guess I would point you back to our website, where we've published a couple of good case examples and EMRAD being one of them. So we've pointed out a couple of areas, some aren't clinical, some are clinical. But for example, one that we've not mentioned on the call so far is a company called Cortical, who were working with NHSBT blood transplant around predicting better flows of blood around the country. So it's one of the things we are doing is looking at a kind of an AI map of where companies who say they are using AI or AI type technologies are being implemented and actually running. The difficulty here is in the center. It's always a bit difficult generally to know exactly what's happening everywhere. But one of the things we're doing is where we see good case examples is try and make a bit of noise about them and showcase them like we've done on our website. So do have a look. It's on the NHSX website under data-driven technologies.
Great, thank you. Peter, there's one for you. Chiron talks about MIA being tested rigorously. What does that mean in practice?
Thank you for that question. Again, I would go back to my intro statement. We need to make sure that any AI that gets into use is safe for the patient. It's safe for use. It doesn't lower the performance, doesn't lower the standard of care. Primarily in AI, that means high performance. It has to be validated, and also stable performance. Again, that stable performance means that has to be no unaccounted systematic performance drop. So primarily looking for systematic performance drops, eliminating that in the development phase, and then testing those whether there are any kind of confounding factors. Confounding factor means exactly a type of input or a type of input feature or input attribute that could throw off an AI algorithm and could make the AI algorithm not work. So for instance, this could be demographics, type of hardware the images were done, or any kind of systematic characteristic of the input that could get an AI algorithm to drop its performance. What we're doing is beyond the development stage, again, have really large trials that have good varied data sets, again, to understand all the variation that the algorithm could encounter in terms of inputs, and just making sure that at the really wide variety of inputs, the performance is assessed, and excuse the statistical phrase, the results are stratified to make sure that any kind of subgroup according to the different input attributes it has pretty much the same performance, or no significant drop in performance. So for us, more specifically, that meant running clinical trials with over, I think, 40,000 cases is what we're looking at, or with I think 4 different types of hardware, I think over 6 different sites at least, and really looking for age and all sorts of different demographic differences that could potentially mean difference. Again, this goes back to the key weakness of AI that we need to combat, which is overfitting. I think there's a very nice point on that in the NHS Buyer's Guide. Again, the opposite of overfitting is patient safety and good reliability. So just demonstrating reliability on really large, very diverse populations, and digging into the results and the performance results as much as possible.
Thank you. Andrew, there's one for you. What opportunities are there to accelerate the adoption of AI to solve COVID-related problems?
I think that's a really nice question. We've been doing some work around the impact of a 3-month halt on breast screening in the East Midlands, and it's a significant number of women that won't be screened as a result. 300,000+ women in total. And one of the things that we recognise is that without us doing something really creative and innovative and using potentially AI to help us, it will take us 27 months to catch that back up, which means that in those 27 months, that woman who's been in for a screen could actually potentially move from stage 1 cancer to stage 4 cancer, potentially ultimately have a very significant outcome and a poor outcome at the end of it as a result. So one of the things we'd love to explore is the opportunity of using AI to triage those patients, to get them back in first, get them imaged, and then see how we might be able to speed up that process. So there's very practical solutions that we could explore to deliver a post-COVID world that deals with the impact of the COVID delay in general healthcare delivery, but also potentially enables us to look at risk stratification of patients in the future, and enables us to look at different ways of delivering services. I think there's some really, really good examples and others, not just in breast screening. We're exploring a number of options here from an AI perspective in MRAD to try and help us with that catchback of missed reports.
Okay, I'm going to do the last question, which is from Alex Kafex. Hi, Alex. Which is, would AI have been able to spot Ian Patterson, the rogue breast surgeon? Do we? No, I mean, clearly not through breast screening, different sort of breast surgery. But would we be able to spot rogue surgeons? Indra, what do you think?
Well, it all goes down to the data, right?
Yeah,
we collect data on performance to that level. If we did, then could have done, and we don't, then that's the question.
See, the medical director should have spotted it without AI, perhaps. But yeah, okay.
I think there's a way of thinking about it. I would say that all AI deployments should be ideally coupled with some kind of quality control, ideally automated quality control. There's a fair chance that even if the AI is not optimized for looking at downstream impact, it's quite possible to pick up, as long as the data is collected and thorough and large amounts of data are collected. Should be possible to find trends. So I would say that this could actually be a very nice side effect of deploying AI solutions, of finding inefficiencies elsewhere in the system, just by looking at how it performs and just by trying to do the post-market surveillance.
Thank you. We're going to move on to another poll, but Dom and Indra, do you have any final comments, the authors of the buying guide, for our audience? Any final thoughts? We've got some very good questions, and I'm sorry we couldn't answer them all. Dom, will you?
I just have one ask, and I think because there's quite a few people on this call, as colleagues have said on the chat here, that that are at the coalface. You know, this is us just responding to the volume of emails that we're getting of how we deploy AI, and we've put this out to kind of start a conversation. So if you've got additional questions or other bits that you need answers to, we will do our best to follow up on this so that we can, you know, this is part of a journey that we're all going through to make sure we make sense of this marketplace, and make sure, I think fundamentally we all agree it's around patient safety and clinical safety. So we need to make sure that we work together on this. So please, there is an email address and everything on there. So do connect with us, and we'll work with you as we iterate going forward. It's not the start, it's not the end, but it's the start of a conversation.
Indra, anything to add? Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. So April, could we put that second poll up?
No,
Oh,
I
sorry.
think Tom's done it beautifully.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.
Right, our post-discussion thoughts, can you fill that in? Have you changed your mind? Do you feel better? Do you feel better equipped? Okay, the results. Have you changed your mind? Yes, 12%, no, 24%, not applicable, 63. Okay. Do you feel better equipped to know what a good AI product looks like? Yes, 88%. That's better. That's great. No, 12%. Ah, terrific. Good. Thank you. So, yeah, you did a great job, panel. Thank you. So it leaves it to me to thank everyone. Thank you. Huge thanks to all our speakers. That nobody's cat walked across the screen. This is a great achievement. But for our first CHN virtually, it's been terrific. And thank you, audience, very engaged. And our backup team as well with all the questions, etc. Our next event, CHN event, is virtual. It's on June the 3rd, and it's on health data and digital health, balancing ethics, value, and speeding innovation. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you to Chiron for supporting this one. If anybody wants to support CHN, we always say that, get our begging bowl out, do approach us. So thank you all, and have a good evening. I'm sorry we're not going for drinks, but have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.